Welcome, everybody. This is a special time honoring my mom, your friend, your relative. A few words that came to mind for me were loving kindness, singing, early morning letter writing, be home at 6 for our candlelit dinner, family meetings, a bulletin board filled with old notes. Behind it all was Willa, our special Willa, loving mother and compassionate friend. And looking out at all of you, I can see the love reflected in your faces. When we were young and we would go on car trips, Mom always had us singing in the car. She taught us how to harmonize, that if you put your hands up to your ears like that, you can hear yourself better when you're singing another part. And we used to kid her. Oh, here comes Mom with her songbooks. But looking back, I'm very grateful that we had that. In a way, I feel like I was on the tail end of a generation that actually sang. That kids don't need to sing anymore because they have their iPods, whatever they're called. And we learned spirituals and rounds and folk songs. It was just a wonderful way to be exposed to music. She even took us to hear Marian Anderson at Wilberforce when I was quite young. And that was a big influence for me. And of course, Mom was always wanting to soothe the ills of the world, whether it was making phone calls to raise money for Friends Music Camp, or marching in Selma, or sponsoring a beans and rice dinner to raise money for Oxfam. She was always ready to make a difference. And she inspired me when I was my first year in college. I did a clothing drive for striking miners in Kentucky, and it was just sort of something that you just did. And she was a very caring mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. She always kept a couple drawers of toys available for little visitors, and a box of gifts ready just for any occasion. And if you happened to drop by, you were usually given tea and probably some oatmeal cookies. And she helped to sort of create rhythms in our lives. We were home by 6 for dinner. On Tuesdays in the wintertime, we went swimming at Wilberforce and listened to Dragnet on the way home, and had cinnamon toast and hot chocolate when we got home. And of course, every week we had family meetings, which we all really loved. We've all been very blessed to have Willa Dallas in our lives. And may she still live on in the love that we have for her and for one another. So as you can see in your program, my sister Barry is going to say a few words about Mom's life. And then my other sister Wendy is going to read a poem. And but before we do that, we're going to sing a song. As I said, Mom always liked singing, so it seemed appropriate to have a few songs scattered around. And then later we're going to be blessed with a song from the Threshold Choir, which Mom really enjoyed hearing. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we are to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we will be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, we will not be ashamed. To turn will be our delight. till by turning, turning we come round right. Thank you. Okay, Barry, you're on.
Hi, I'm Willa Dallas. Grinnell, I'm the oldest child. If I write you a check, it's Barbara. The obituary that many of you read in the Yellow Springs News or picked up here tells of the major events and forces in my mother's life, or I should say the forces she brought to her life and those around her. She was a wonderful mother who took great care of her children and other people's children and other people. She was always there for all of us, a steady presence in our lives, in our daily lives, sometimes unbidden, unwanted. She was indeed a force. My cousin Marjorie Hess Garton wrote me with these thoughts about her, and Marjorie is the oldest sister of my father's oldest sister, and then Peter is next in line in that Hess family, and then Matthew, and there's even 3 others. I think 2 or 3 others. Marge says, Auntie Willa was one of those background people, at least to little kids who were there to visit. Barry and I went off swimming in the water trough or playing with the Dewey kids. We never thought about all she did to make it all our fun possible. She was the one who saw to it that all of us, and when you're talking about the Hesses 60 years ago, that was a large number, that all of us got a place to sleep, food to eat, and activities to keep us busy. As an adult thinking back on all that, she never made it seem like work to have us all there. She smiled and laughed at all our stories and never seemed to be too busy to stop and listen to our adventures. She was the first hippie I ever knew. She welcomed everyone as equals, treated everyone as a friend. She espoused ideas and projects long before they were popular, and I never heard her downgrade anyone. And she volunteered her time and effort in all these projects. She was the first model of how to do what you know is right, regardless of what others think. Everyone talks about it, but she lived it. And she never said or implied that we were wrong if we disagreed with her. A true woman of principle, when that was very often hard to find. I respected her and love her dearly. I will miss her enormously. May God rest her soul. Much has been made of my mother's activism, social activism in areas of peace, civil rights, prisoners' rights, gay rights, but she was such a fine mother. How she did it, I don't know. 4 children, 3 meals a day, every day. She cut my hair. She taught us to cook, how to level the flour in the measuring cup, how to measure shortening in a measuring cup of ice water. She exposed us to culture, an important ingredient in the finer things in life. She took us to symphony concerts, dance programs, famous opera singers. She enrolled me in piano lessons, dance lessons. She took me to hear Martin Luther King Jr. deliver a commencement talk at Central State in about 1957-58, just the 2 of us. I don't remember the content, but I do remember how he started off very slow and quiet, and then soared to a crescendo that drew us all along with him. In 2000, after a large Dallas family Thanksgiving at the Outdoor Education Center, she and I took a trip to Portsmouth so that I could pursue research on a project that grew from having possession of the courtship correspondence of her parents. Remember, weeks before that Thanksgiving, and extending into Portsmouth and beyond, people in Florida were counting ballots. David Boies and Theodore Olson were holding forth. At the Portsmouth Hotel late into the night, I was glued to the story on TV, and Mom was up early reading or writing letters in the bathroom so that I wouldn't be disturbed until I woke up. I loved that time with her. We found her father's shop on Front Street and saw the murals about Portsmouth history that included the Mitchell Lace Company. Her friend Janice Mitchell was one who subsequently came to join my parents in the Newark ashram then married Chuck Foreman from a missionary dynasty in India, who subsequently presided at my marriage to a man who had been in India also. We saw her childhood home, and we found her parents and other winters in the Portsmouth Cemetery. I was fortunate enough to have known both her parents, and I have memories of staying with them in Portsmouth. Her father was 17 years older than her mother, and their courtship correspondence involved almost daily letters from 1915 to 1917. Roma Bell Madison, her mother, was working as an encyclopedia saleswoman, living in various towns in Ohio at rooming houses for young women. She was very independent, but always on the lookout for a husband who was a good catch. She met Frederick Benjamin Winter, a pillar of the Portsmouth community, a Mason who taught Sunday school and lived with his mother and sister. His letters to her are full of gushing love, and hers to him are flirtatious to entice him to propose marriage, which he was slow to do. Both of them were involved with the church, which at the time was a center of culture, where they would go to choral programs. She eventually became a music teacher for the schools and continued to be a working woman even after her marriage and having 2 children, Bob and Willa. My grandmother had high standards, and my mother felt she never measured up. Where she found her joy was in sports and Girl Scouts and Girl Scout camp at Camp Molly Lauman, where I subsequently went and hated it. All we did was look for firewood and go to rifle practice and swim in a dirty pool. But this was a pattern. My mother encouraged me to do what she had enjoyed most, and I didn't want any part of it. I wanted my mother to wear dresses, stockings, and high heels, not pedal pushers. Later I learned that the stockings and high heels were a disguise for the shame of too early pregnancies. Later in life, after I was long married, I was surprised by her influence on me in unplanned circumstances. When I was a school teacher for a time and a couple boys got into a fight, I grabbed them both by the hair and pulled them apart. I would yell at them. Even today, I'm on the Antioch College Alumni Board, and I speak out and don't think what I'm saying, and all the things my mother used to do at meetings. Willa prevails. My mother loved to give parties, cast parties, parties for my father's students. In the mid-1950s, she made pizza, long before it was even known about or popular, before Chef Boyardee. And as Patty mentioned, she was a prodigious letter writer. We all received letters from her written while waiting for a bus, or in a hospital waiting room, or a dentist office, or early in the morning in the times she loved best, when she was alone, awake, and may have been in the process of doing a laundry or defrosting the refrigerator, and she would write letters. She truly savored that time, and like everything else in her life, she shared it with us. Don Landis, whose parents were Yellow Springs stalwarts and friends of my parents, wrote this for today. I loved her and Dal dearly. I kind of viewed them as an extra set of parents. I got to know them best when they stayed here in Santa Cruz for Dal's play in '88 or '89. Willa had our house the most organized and functional that it's ever been. Meals were on time and the budget was tight. Don, do you think $100 a month from each of us will be all right? Don, how do you think we should split up the housework? And she knew what to do with overworked folks after a long day. Dal had really long days, me too. And one evening I came stumbling in late, hazy from hunger and fatigue, and she must have seen me coming because I swear she was standing right at the door with a plate of hot food and holding the plate in front of my nose, led me to the table and settled me in a chair, and for all I know would have spoon-fed me if needed. As you know, Willa was a bridge player, and I fancied myself as one. And one evening I took her to the Santa Cruz Bridge Club, and we played partners in duplicate, and I played so badly. Don, why did you lead that? Don, why didn't you bid your spades? She never asked to go with me again. You can be sure that if David was around, he would have been right there with you, and in a sense, I guess he is. Don's older brother David was my classmate who has died a few years ago. All my love to you and Patty and the rest of the Dallas crew. You're amazing, lovely people making the world a better place. Love, Don. Hear that, Mom?
I did a lot of traveling with my mother, and she took me and another friend. She took me. Okay. She took me and another friend to look at colleges in New England, and we were riding and riding. We were in a Volkswagen, a little Volkswagen, and we got to a gas station, and the guy looked at the oil, and there was no oil in the car. So Mom decided to, she would have these, she knew these, there were two truckers there who had a big van. And so Mom said, well, why don't you put the Volkswagen in the back of the van, and then you can drop it off in Yellow Springs. And then there was other times when we were going across country that were really special times. We would get up very early in the morning and get the camping gear and put it on the car, and I was sitting with her in the front seat. I was in her lap, and there were lambs all over the hillsides. And they were just so beautiful, and, you know, and sitting there in her lap and being all nice, taken care of. It was really, really wonderful. Mom had an issue with napping. She really needed her nap time, and it was very important to her. And we were going to move into a house that's around where the pond is, the DeWine Pond. And Mom looked at the house for a while, and she said, there's a railroad track here. I'm not going to be able to sleep. And so we didn't go to that, we didn't buy that house. There's this poem that's written by Willa Cather, and it's called Going Home. Burlington route. How smoothly the trains run beyond the Missouri, beyond the Missouri. Even in my sleep, I know when I've crossed the river. The wheels turn as if they were glad to go. The sharp curves and windings left behind, the roadway wide open, the crooked straight and the rough places plain. They run smoothly, they run softly too. There is not noise enough to trouble the lightest sleeper, nor jolting to wake the weary-hearted. I open my window and let the air blow in, the air of morning that smells of grass and earth, earth, the grain giver. How smoothly the trains run beyond the Missouri. Even in my sleep, I know when I have crossed the river. The wheels turn as if they were glad to go. They run like running water, like youth running away. They spin bright along the bright rails, singing and humming and singing and humming. They run remembering. They run rejoicing as if they too were going home. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tony Dallas. Just a couple of things that were, the first is a letter from comes from a letter from Chuck Foreman. Chuck Foreman was married to Jan Mitchell, who Barry was referring to. And he was remembering Jan and my mother joining this, what they call an ashram in Newark, My parents met at Albion College. My father went on to Union Seminary, where he got involved with Dave Dellinger and a bunch of people, became a pacifist. He was sort of a pacifist before, but they became a sort of a, I don't know if you could call it a militant pacifist, but they refused to register for the draft in World War II, and they created this place taking in people off the street, that sort of thing. And this is what my father had written my mother, who was still at Albion, if she would join him. And this is from the letter that Chuck Foreman wrote. He says, Jan and Willa were best friends in Portsmouth. And it was for this reason that when Willa was invited by Dal to join him at the Newark ashram for a summer, Willa's mother said she could go, but only if Jan went too. Jan was free that summer, so she agreed, but her father told her that if she was going to be dealing with, quote, colored people, she should send him a telegram and he would arrange some excuse to come home. Well, of course, when she got there, Jan wrote out a telegram. The group was going to hear Dave Dellinger speak at a church that first night. So Jan planned to stop off at the Western Union on the way home. But Dave's speech so completely turned her life around. She crumpled up the telegram and became a strong member of the group. That fall, she decided to go to Union to study organ and choir conducting, but she also met me, and we decided to go to India. Visits at her home from then on were endless arguments over social and political questions. Family arguments were completely outside my experience, but it probably did me good in getting me a wider experience of life. The second is from Henry Harvey, and Henry was also a member of this group. I knew Willa many years ago when she was living in the ashram in Newark at 37 Wright Street, a mixed black and white area with an all-white congregational church, which had not yet fled the area. She and several other wives and girlfriends of the Union Seminary 6 non-registrants to the wartime draft had moved from the seminary dorm to live in a mixed area. They had first tried Harlem. When men were threatened by the need to serve a year in jail, I was moved to go live at the ashram to help keep it going. Thus I joined Willa, Mary Lou, Fran Hall, Dave Dellinger, and Jan Foreman. The women lived on the third floor and the men on the second in the third-decker double bed which I made. From Fran Hall and I pooled our savings and bought a 3-floor apartment building which better served our needs. Willa acted as house mother. She and others ran a preschool for neighborhood children. We turned the church basement into a chamber of horrors for Halloween and invited the neighborhood children. The church trustees allowed this, but we must not come to Sunday service with a mixed group, or the friendly pastor would have lost his job. Finally, this last piece is from a letter my father wrote my mother around the same time period, before he was in prison. Dearest Will, I wish you were here tonight. I always do, but tonight, just a little bit more than usual. There's so much comfort in knowing you're, excuse me, and knowing you're here. Your letter in my pocket, a flash of the way you turn your head, your picture, a cookie, and the whole world seems to open up for me. Tonight, the fellows that work in the settlement met here in our room to discuss some dramatic project for the kids to put on at Christmas time, had some cider and pretzels, revolt, and explained that you couldn't be here but sent your greetings. They like that. It's amazing. No, it's puzzling. The way we little people muddle around, and it's almost miraculous that things turn out as well as they do. Gee, Will. So many times I wish you were here to talk with, get your ideas, your confidence, your life. There's a little there's a little Puerto Rican girl about 13 years old. Excuse me. At the settlement. She's just the age when things are opening up for her. She's full of life and she bubbles all the time. She has flashing black eyes and seems to be in love with life. If only some fine woman could help her through this adolescence, someone she could identify herself with. There's so many things pulling the other way. You see, dearest, we're working redemptively to a great extent with a cause that is so uncontrollable. Gee, I hope you're having a grand weekend. I'm with you every minute, sweetheart. 18 more days till Christmas. Good morning. Love me. What's next on the, are we doing the bread? Is that the?
Paloma? Yeah. Paloma, Tony's daughter, is going to say a few words, and then we're going to sing a song.
Hi, can you hear me? So, as I'm one of 3 grandchildren, but I was the first. And I have so many memories of both of them, but of my grandmother. I just wanted to say a couple. You know, I was a little girl. My best friend and I used to play in her closet. And in the Whiteman Street house, it had these wonderful sort of accordion doors that would open up. And so we would put on her clothes, and we'd become characters, and we would put on her jewelry, and we'd put on these plays. And they would sit and watch us hour after hour putting on these plays. And I remember as a teenager traveling with my grandmother to Chicago, and we stayed with Servas. We always stayed with Servas. And as a teenager, that was awkward and strange and intriguing. And as an adult, it was really fascinating to see sort of the decisions that had led her to go through Servas. But for some reason, my grandfather went on. I think he went on to stay with family. He went to Michigan. At any rate, it was just the 2 of us. And she didn't have enough cash. But she wanted to take me to the Hard Rock Cafe. She must have had a credit card. And we go up to this cab driver, and she starts telling him, will you just take us for free? I've got to take my granddaughter. We're going to go to the Hard... And he did. And so if you know Willa, she could convince about anybody, anything. And I guess another thing I wanted to say was, you know, much of my life I spent sort of living between my father's house and my mother's house, and it was in Yellow Springs. But one of the things I've always valued about my grandmother, and both of them, was that they really sort of helped make my life 2 parts of a whole. It was always integrated. My siblings on my mother's side were all my siblings. They were part of my life. They were never excluded. We used to all get dropped off in the mornings and then walk from there to school. Every Christmas time, she would write a note to my mother's parents, and my maternal grandmother would always read it to me, and she said, it's so lovely to be able to share such a wonderful granddaughter with you. And it was every single Christmas. And these were the things that her instinct was always a loving one. It was always embracing, and it's something I'm forever grateful for. My own daughter, Camila, is 6 and a half, and it was so important to me that she also got to know my grandmother, my grandparents. And just about a week before, maybe a week and a half before she died, we had wheeled her outside of the Friends Care Center, and Camila was on a swing. And Willa would sing the, the swing poem, the Robert Louis Stevenson. And she sort of sang it, and Camila would say, again, again, again. And she would sing it again and again and again. But another thing that she would do every Christmas, she made a date bread. And I'm sure many of you have had her date bread. And so we made a bunch of date bread yesterday and wanted to share it with each of you. So we're just going to pass that around. And in the program, you have her date bread recipe. So that's a little gift from all of us and from Willa. Okay? Thank you.
While we're spreading the date bread, we'll spread her loving light. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere that I may go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere that we may go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere that I may go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All around this big wide world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around this big wide world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around this big wide world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. Hey, hey, please don't take my sunshine away. If you'd like to say something, you can raise your hand or come up here, either way, and we have a microphone to pass around.
I'll just say one thing. When I was 5, you young mothers out here, listen to this. When I was 5 and I got up in the night and had to pee, I went and told my mother, and she came in and she warmed the toilet seat for me.
Those are little secrets I had never known. I'm Ken Winter. I'm cousin to this mafia that you've been hearing from today, and grew up in Michigan. I'm the son of Bob, Willa's brother. And when my parents divorced, Willa and Dal did something my father really hated. They tried to be friends with both him and my mother. That was something my dad could not tolerate. For him, it was disloyalty. And so my brother Dave and I were forbidden to have any contact with the Dallas clan. Well, I had visited enough with this family, and I was of an age enough to appreciate what that might mean, though I might not have been able to put it into words, that I found the way around this, and I kept contact with the family, and was sort of the conduit for Dave and I to maintain our connection with these fine people who really taught me what family could be, how important relationships are, and that informs my ministry wherever I've gone. Thank you, Willa and Dal.
Willa, I don't know how much detail I need to go into. It seemed like she's always so brave, courageous, and she would insist upon loving me despite the fact that I didn't think that I was lovable.
Say the tail end of that story, Wendy was the truck driver did take the car.
I'm Nancy Putnam, and my mom, Jean, knew Willa since she was about 2 years old, I think. She always told me they were second cousins, and I owe my parents' relationship to Willa, because Willa convinced my mom to come out to the ashram in Newark. And my dad, I guess, was working at the co-op at the time, and my mom got a job there, and that's how they met. So I've heard that story many times over the years, and I will miss Willa's warmth and friendship forever, but she'll always be with
Hi, my name is Jessica Andrews. I was Jessica Langton growing up in Yellow Springs. My first memory of Willa, I was probably 5. My family and I had just come over from England, or we'd been here, I guess, a year or so, or maybe not that long. And my father was teaching theater at Case Western Reserve, and Dal, I think, had maybe taken a sabbatical, but in any case, he was there taking a class with my father, and they became great friends. But my first memory of Willa is that I just remember going in front to an apartment, and obviously a door. My mother knocked on it, and it was flung open, and there was Willa with several little children behind her, and that is how we were welcomed into the Dallas family. The next thing I know, we were visiting the Dallases in Yellow Springs. The next thing I knew, we were living in their garage on Winter Street for I don't know how long. And the next thing I knew, we lived in Yellow Springs for the rest of, well, not quite the rest of my life, but for a long time, and until my mother Louise Solberg's death, and they remained obviously very close friends. Those of you who've grown up in Yellow Springs know that it is an extended family. The whole town often is, but my extended family included the Treiklers, the Lithgows, the Deweys, and the Dallases. And my mother was a professional. Louise Solberg taught dance for many years, and then founded the Riding Center. But I used to envy people who got to have casseroles for dinner. And anytime going to the Dallases for dinner, which I think I probably did a lot, there was always a casserole. And I used to think that was the best. Because my mother was not a cook like that, and I just thought that was, that's what every child should have, was a noodle casserole. And I think the other memory, and Wendy alluded to the napping, we were always, of course, eager to telephone each other. But if you called between, I don't know, 1 and 3, or, the line would be busy just constantly, because in those days you could take the phone off the hook and it wouldn't make that horrible screeching noise. It would just be off the hook, and you knew Willa's napping. We'll wait, or we'll just go over there. But she stayed in my life up until the time that she died, even though I no longer live here, now live in Arizona, but would come back at least once, if not twice a year, for either a reunion of one class or another, or something else would bring us here, and we'd always go and see Willa and Al and Ray, and that would just be, we'd make the rounds and just sit and be enveloped again in their family and in their love. And I feel grateful for that from the age of 5 until last year, really, when I saw her for the last time at Friends Care. But she was part of my family, as many others were here, but a very, very, very important part of it, and I will feel ever connected to her and to the Dallas family. Thank you.
I'm Susan Dewey, Oldfield. This is a note my sister wrote for the memorial, my sister Kathy. I always considered Willa as my second mom. I loved her as such, and always knew that if I ever needed her or Dal, that they would be there for me. Both Willa and Dow always had a warm and non-judgmental open ear. I loved hanging out at their house. Wherever I was in the world, I always got a birthday card from Willa, and that always made me happy. There is so much I could say, and I wish I could be there, but suffice it to say that losing Willa and Dow leaves a large hole in my heart. Willa and Dow and Barry and Patty were the first people my sister Kathy and I met in Yellow Springs. In fact, we stayed at their house when we first arrived in town. Willa and Dow and my father George all went to Albion College in Michigan. My dad was teaching journalism at Defiance College after the war. Apparently, one day, Dow drove up in a truck and excitedly told Dad there was a journalism opening at Antioch. My mom's version is that we immediately packed up and drove to Yellow Springs. She said she was furious. Not that she regretted the move to Yellow Springs, but that George didn't consult her. Thus started a very long friendship. Barry and I were born on the same day, she a year older than me. This may be how we started the tradition of celebrating birthdays together. We also celebrated Christmas Eve together. The Dallases lived around the corner from the Deweys, and as kids, we were in their house or they in ours. We played softball behind the college gym, hide and seek, and kick the can. We had plays and circus shows and practiced the splits. Quite a gaggle of girls: Susan, Kathy, Barry, Patty, Wendy, and Vicki and Jimmy Faust. When we discovered cake mix in a box, we went over to the Dallases after school, and a flurry of baking ensued. As long as we didn't wake Willa up from her nap, we were cool. Another day we might be at our house making fudge. Willa was like my second mom. She encouraged me, bawled me out, and was always there to lend an ear. When I moved to California, she would call me maybe once a year and ask how everyone was doing. She remembered my kids' names and enjoyed hearing about how they were doing. I usually called Willa and Dow sometime in the fall to tell them both happy birthday. If I was in town, I would drop in for a cup of tea and some banana bread. Even a few years ago, when we were moving my mom into her little apartment, Tony wheeled Willa over from the care center, and Willa asked me, "How is Happy doing?" It took a second to realize she was asking me about my husband, Lucky. We had a long friendship, and I am happy to have known her.
I'm Paula Dreichler. I think on the day that Willa died, there was a little less energy on earth. One of my childhood envies was her beautiful name. She had the most beautiful name of all our mothers. But there was confusion also. Was her name really Willow? Or was it really a Willa tree? Someone else didn't feel that way about Willa's name. One of Barry's college boyfriends felt that Willa was against him and was lobbying against him with Barry. So he would come over and drink with my mother and complain about old Willer. Willa made things fun. She was fun. She sought to make things right. Only once did I see her speechless and perplexed. She took Barry and Jessica and me shopping one Christmas at Wright's in Dayton. We were maybe 8, 9, 10. And we were eating lunch at Wright's, which was always a treat because you got chicken pot pie in this little white dish with a little chicken on top. So we were all eating our chicken pot pies, and Barry had an existential vision. She looked around and she said, "Look at all these people. They're all shopping, and they all think it's important. They're living their little lives. They're coming and going. Here we are on Earth. What are we doing here? So Jessica and I immediately got infected. We went, oh my God, oh my God, what are we all doing here? Finally, we looked at Willa and we said, what can we do? And Willa was just staring at us. And finally she said, well, love. Love one another. At the time, of course, this didn't quite answer our existential concerns. But in retrospect, I think it was a pretty good answer. At Dallas Memorial, I thought at Willa's memorial, I could go on and on and on and on, but I realize everyone wants to go on and on and on about Willa. And so I just want to end with two things. One is that my father and Dal worked together for years in the theater. And at one point in the 60s, I think, they were both staying at the Algonquin Hotel in New York to show this model for the theater. Maybe it was earlier, maybe it was later. Anyway, they were both at the Algonquin Hotel, and I was there too. And they were waiting for Willa to drive from Yellow Springs to join Dal at the Algonquin. Well, the time came when she was supposed to arrive, and she didn't come. And another day went by, and she didn't come. And another day went by, and she didn't come. Well, my father and I were saying, well, Dal, aren't you worried? And of course he said, she'll get here. Well, she did. She called him, and she was living in a flop house in the Bowery, where it was $2 a night, as opposed to the Algonquin. And she made Dal move there with her. Once again, the reason she was late was because she had forgotten to put oil in the car. And in Wheeling, West Virginia, the oil ran out and the car died. Well, once again, she found a friendly truck driver and made him put the damn car in the truck and drive her to New York City, which isn't where he was going. And it was just amazing, and for all I know, she made him turn the truck around and take the car back to Yellow Springs to get the oil put in. The last thing is, I think, if there is such a place as heaven, on the day that Willa died, there was quite a stir up there. And one person said, I feel we're about to be organized. And another person said, I feel we're going to sing. And another person said, I feel I'm going to be loved. If you know the movie, The Big Lebowski, the last line in that is about the Jeff Bridges character. The dude abides. So I think with the dude, Willa abides.
I'm Abigail Cobb. I'm Paloma's mother. And my life has intersected with the Dallases throughout the decades. I've had the privilege of being close and involved with two Yellow Springs families, the Dallases and the Beeries, and other families. It's been a real privilege. With Willa's passing, with Dal's passing, and now Willa's passing, this is really the end of an important era for me. When I first came to Yellow Springs as a 17 or 18-year-old, I was a confused and broken child of the suburbs. My own family had moved repeatedly in my childhood following my father's job, and I was a lost person, and I came here and I was embraced by the Dallas family, and I was embraced by Yellow Springs. The Dallases, the Deweys, the Hudsons, their group of friends. And slowly, I began to heal as a person. The Dallases introduced me to things that I really yearned for, things that I knew existed but had vanished already from the suburban world that I lived in. Things like eating casseroles and hanging your clothes on the line, letting your children play in sandboxes, shopping at thrift stores, singing folk songs, dancing folk dances. These things had vanished already from the world of the late 1960s, and I thirsted for them. So even though later I officially left the Dallas family, I was able to raise my children, all of my children, in a miraculous community, a community of warmth, of love, and of solid values. Willa and Dal were always kind to me, always forgiving, such generous hearts. They embraced all of my children. They took all of my children Christmas shopping every year, even when we lived in pretty dire circumstances. My children had presents that they wrapped up and put under the tree, thanks to Willa and Dal, who took them to Rinks and Gold Circle and places like that, and baked cookies with them. I have such affection and such gratitude for Willa and Dal as human beings and for the world that they helped to create and maintain here in Yellow Springs. Such an important place, and with their passing, this is really the end of an era. It's something that, a place, a time, a set of values that we all need to keep going for the next seven generations, at least.
Did any of you know that Tom Jones had a show on TV on CBS? I was with Mom one night when that show was on, and Mom wanted to try maybe taking some pot. And so I gave her some, and she smoked a little bit, but I don't feel anything. I said, you will. I still don't feel it. And also on the show, Janis Joplin was the guest star. So it was a really fantastic evening. I think this is sort of what I feel like a lot. She'll be up for anything. And that was like that. And it was so much fun. And I still don't feel it. Why don't we get some of those frozen pizza things? And it was just so much fun. It was just like, who else would do that? Anyway, it was really fun.
What I remember about
Aunt Willa.
Uncle Murr, when I was really young, my folks would take us there on visits. Is that a better? Yes, okay. They would take us for visits. Now you got to understand that we've never had a new car, or we had a lot of old cars, and we had never gotten from Michigan to Yellow Springs without that car breaking down at least 2 or 3 times. Literally, we'd spend nights in gas stations and whatever. But when we'd get here, we always really enjoyed the visit. And I remembered I liked talking to Uncle Murr and Aunt Willa, and it just was the life lesson I got from this is because later on in life that Uncle Murr and Aunt Willa were coming to visit us at my home, and you'd see Uncle Murr with, Robbie on his knee, talking to him, and I realized that what he did, the life lesson I got from it, is that he always made us feel special because he was listening to me at the time, or he was listening to Rob, and I know that he did that with everybody. You just see it, that he was always open. So it was a life lesson for me that I just like to pass on. So make somebody feel important.
I want to jump on that, Peter, because that is the thing that I remember her doing with all of us, no matter whether they came up to be a part of a project that I was doing, and she always had a little gift for me. It could be soap or stationery or always her date nut bread. And that sense of really focusing in on us. Whenever she spoke to any of the kids, Willa would get right down by them and want to know what they were doing, and really you knew that she cared about what they were doing. And I love all my relatives. They were all great, all my aunts and uncles. But you know, when you're a kid, adults are pretty busy with their own agenda. And she always seemed like we were part of her agenda. And so she was always thinking global in peace and justice issues, and acting on the minute, specific, small. And that was a great lesson to take into. We had a lot of fights, me and Willa. So it isn't all just like, oh, and everything, you know, because we were, you know, we would do this sometimes. She'd be like, blah, 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 and I'd be like, did you just, boo? And, you know, so, but that was one of the things that was great, too, is that we just could do that and move right on, just breathe and move right on. And I remember when my kids were little, and she would do the same thing with them. And when Harper was a really little toddler, she would always like kind of make a round of you know, garage sales and stuff. And then she'd come with things, you know, games and stuff. And she gave Harper a baby doll, a really real-looking little baby doll. And Harper was just never without that from that day on. And it was a small gesture, and a gesture that I mean, I like that idea of things moving along and you pass them along. And she and I shared that love of saying, oh, that's nice. 25 cents, you know, and that was great. Then we were so joyful, and but that's all. I just wanted to dovetail in with that because we all got such a lesson in. She walked the walk, but she could sit the sit too, and talk.
I think we can have a quick little song. The Threshold Choir is going to sing in a few minutes, but there was a song that Mom enjoyed singing. And is Camila here? Is she here? Oh, okay. I forgot to have her come up for the Little Light song. I forgot. But anyway, Mary, do you want to help me with the Old Mill Stream? Mom used to like the posters for Old Mill Stream, and at Friends Care, she would always come up the front and do the motion. Down by the old mill stream, where I first met you, with your eyes so blue, dressed in gingham too. It was there I knew that you loved me.
false but true. You were 16, I said you were 16. My village queen, not king but queen, down by the old mill stream.
I'm Cheryl Keenan. I only moved here 17 years ago, so I feel like for some of us, I'm going to fill in these later years. But when Jim and I moved here to work at Antioch, we brought Jim's parents with us. A fine Quaker lady she was, and at 86 when she came, Willa was a younger woman at probably 76, and just gifted us with her friendship to my mother. Imagine moving to a town like this when you're moving anywhere when you're 86, but moving to Yellow Springs is different. And when she became housebound, Willa and Patty were her most frequent visitors. And I just want to talk about love, because there was a quality of those three women, Willa, my mother-in-law, and Patty, descending on Nathania when she discovered her artistic talent. And my mother was a painter, my mother-in-law, and it was a privilege to witness what those three women, led by Willa's love of her granddaughter, could do to hold you up in something you might have explored, and then you have all these other gifts that you brought. So, just wanted to share that.
My name is Duke Dewey, Greg Dewey. I'm one of the Dewey kids. You know, there's a story that we asked around the family, what should we talk about? Well, so my brother and I thought about it. You know, it's funny how kids are raised and grow up liking what the other guys have. You know, so you liked it that they had those things. You know, that casseroles. Well, so you know, at our house, my mom of all things made homemade bread, which we thought was awful. And she made soup, and real soup and stuff, you know. And what we wanted to do was go over to Willa's. Go over to the Dallases and have some bologna sandwiches on Wonder Bread, man. Wonder Bread, this stuff was like cool. You could mash it up and make it into shapes and, you know, and have little animals that you have and faces and stuff, and you could still eat it. And eat it after that, and then Willa would make us another bologna sandwich, you know, and it's like, and also she had this great soup called Campbell's, you know, and we didn't know what was wrong with our mom, that she made this soup with these huge chunks of stuff in it. So, you know, and meanwhile, I think the Dallases, I don't know whether this is true or not, but they may have liked the homemade bread that we had over at our house, and you know, I don't know how old I was before I realized, hey, this is pretty good bread. But I still remember that, you know, those bologna sandwiches. Couldn't beat them. We had a lot of fun at the Dallas' house. They were great.
Ann Feldman was Ann Gross when she came to Antioch College, and she lived in our house. We rented out rooms to get extra money, and the house had one bathroom. There were 6 in our family, and at the time we had 4 people living with us. Ann is now a judge in Brooklyn, and she's about 80 years old, and she asked us to bring, she had written us an email on my mother's 90th birthday, and said, you know, that was her thing. So, on your 90th birthday, I've been thinking a lot about our years of friendship. I met you in 1951 when you and Dal rented a room to 4 Antioch students. Tony was born about a month after we moved in, and I still remember Dal's voice on the phone saying, "It's a boy child." How we all managed to live in such a small house with only 1 bathroom is hard to imagine now. But years later, you told me that your family used the bathroom across the street in the gym when the students were gone. My memories of the time I was living in your house are many and vivid. You got up about 5 a.m. and were usually ironing or folding clothes when I came down. You always offered me a cup of coffee, and despite the fact that you had 4 children, the oldest, Barry, being only 8, to care for, you always had time to talk. Since I was only 21 and had no real idea about how hard it was to be a stay-at-home mother, I never realized how difficult the time must have been for you, a newborn, 4 tenants, and 3 other young children. Yet I have no recollection that you ever complained or even mentioned how much work it was. I do recall that someone came over to take a family portrait in the backyard one Sunday morning while we were all still in bed, and when the children raised their voices, either you or Dal said, "To be quiet, be quieter, they'll all move out." And one of the children said, "Good." Our morning conversations covered a wide variety of topics, but they gave me a glimpse into your unfailing idealism, non-judgmentalism, and openness to new ideas and experiences. It seems to me that in the next 60 years, that idealism and faith in humankind never wavered. I have so many memories of the years after I graduated, the time your family lived in our 3-room apartment in Queens, while you looked for a house during Dal's sabbatical and almost got us evicted because the landlord thought we had illegally sublet to a family of 6. How our oldest son, Simon, learned to walk in your kitchen, and how I insisted on keeping him on New York time for the entire week of our visit rather than switching to Ohio time an hour earlier or later, I can't remember which, and how nice you were about such craziness by an inexperienced mother. How in the years after I graduated, you would write me long letters telling me that it was 6 a.m. and your children were still asleep. How you never lost faith in your friend who was convicted of murder, you believed unjustly. How you continued to volunteer in a variety of good causes way past the age when most people would have been content to sit back and relax. And finally, how when I visited you and we walked across campus to the college, the number of people we met who you knew and to whom you never failed to introduce me as a student who lived in the house and babysat for Tony when he was a baby. I could go on, but I want to let you know that you've been a very important part of my life and an inspiration when the world seemed to be in such disarray, not to give up hope. Happy birthday, dear friend, and much love, Anne. You know, when she was a student, our family went on a camping trip to Pike Lake, and Tony was a baby, and she left Anne with Tony. Anne is an only child who knew nothing about children, but it worked out fine. And then my Auntie Uni, my father's youngest sister, this of course is a difficult time for you, but I'm sure you have some good things to remember. When we are impossibly old, we ask our children, do you remember this or that? I remember when we first met your mother. Marge and I thought she looked like Ingrid Bergman. Willa was a strong athlete. She loved to swim and dive. She played golf and had such strong legs. Too bad she had so much pain in her legs these last years. I remember seeing her bending down to talk with the little ones. Willa and Murr is what his side of the family called him from Meredith. Willa and Murr began the reunions, so it will be strange to find it now without them. But the next generations will carry it on, I'm sure. Willa was a great cook, soups and salads, and Murr's great wheat bread. She loved to eat as we all did and was a great taster. There was always a lot of talking and games, all enjoying the Glen, finding a comfortable shady spot to talk. And there was Eric's great grills around the fireplace, sitting and eating the hot dogs and hamburgers fixed by Eric and his chefs. Your mother enjoyed Yellow Springs, and she knew so many people. She would tell us, well, you take me up and someone will bring me home. And she was right, someone did always bring me home. You and your family were so wonderful and you're caring for both Murr and Willa. They had a wonderful care and friends care too. We thank you for all you did for them. We are thankful to you for Yellow Springs memories And although there were difficult times for all the families, there were many good times too. Please give our love to all your family. They started a family reunion of the Dallas family. My father, there were 5 children in that family at Memorial Day weekend at the Outdoor Ed Center, and this was 50 years ago, something like that. 55 years ago. So every year since then, the family's gotten together, and tiny children are now grandparents. Almost. Great, okay. You want a microphone?
I don't think I need it. Lori? I'll be glad to. I think I should give a nod to a very special time that a group of us, and many of us are here today, had with Willa and Dow. This was a couples group that went on for, I think, close to 40 years. Am I right? About 40 years? And we would meet, initially we met almost every Friday night. And then, you know, as the years went on and we were busy with families and so on, it spread out a little more than that. But we met regularly up until they both went into friends' care. Dow and Willa would come over to whoever's house the potluck and the discussion would be at. Dow played his role as a psychotherapist, as we said, but always very insightful. But Willa had a role that I don't think any of us will ever forget. Yes, she was the organizer, and yes, she would often get us together in the later times. But in addition to that, Willa would always say, let's go around the room or the table and find out what everybody is doing. And we would all share, you know, what we were doing, what our kids were doing, and so on. And she remembered, you know, what we were doing and asked questions, and was just always really there to keep the group on sort of what was the original intent, which was to help all of us through some of the difficult times in our lives. And, you know, as couples over 40 years, we saw a few difficult times and we saw a lot of happy times. And Will was just such a big part of that. So I appreciate that so much. And of course, we heard a lot about you guys growing up along the way. And all of it good. They were such loving parents. They really cared a lot about you guys.
Well, how about we have a song from the Threshold Choir who's going to stand in place and sing one of Mom's favorite songs.
We are the members of the Threshold Choir, and Willa was a member of the Threshold Choir. And we're going to sing for you one of her favorite songs called My Grateful Heart. My grateful heart, so filled with years of living, memories flow by me like petals on a stream. My grateful heart forgives so many sorrows
was with us. Oh, okay, David.
I'm David Wishkart.
Yeah.
I moved here in 1983, took a job at Wittenberg teaching economics, and I was coming from Champaign-Urbana. Bought a house on High Street, and we closed on the house. Earl Holiday, some of you may remember him, took me to the closing. We got back, and Earl had a bottle of wine to celebrate, so we drank that and finished it. I thought, well, I need to get my phone service started, so I drove downtown and got out of the car at this Ohio station, which is where the BP is now, and there were people demonstrating in front of the post office. I thought, this is really amusing. They were picketing the violence in Nicaragua, and so I walked on my canes over to the phone booth, and I still had a sport coat and a tie on because I thought that's what you wore to a house closing, you know. So I'm calling AT&T to get the phone started, and this gentleman walks over to me. This is a story about Dal, but it could be about Willa, I think, as well. Rather large gentleman, bearded, and he walks right up to me while I'm on the phone. He said, "Are you with the FBI?" My God, these people aren't taking any chances. I knew I moved into a hippie-go groovy town, but this is just too much. And it took me a while to figure out who it was. I think it was when we started going to the Unitarian Fellowship, Joe and I, when we married, but became very close friends with Willa and Dallas. What a pleasure that's been, the whole family, too.
I can't stand up.
That's okay. Just hold this kind of close by.
I'm Sue Clauser. I've lived in this village now for 57 years, and when Abby was speaking, it was as if she thought all the kindness was gone. It isn't. That's why I'm here. But we came here when Charlie got a job under Ed Hertzberg at the field. And Ed said to him, "My God, you can't live in Dayton. We have Shakespeare under the stars." And that's why we came.
Mom's nephew, Ken Winter, who is the minister in near Sacramento, California, is going to do a benediction, and then we're going to sing "We Shall Overcome." Ken?
Thanks for the estimate, but these three abide: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. You've heard that today. And the author of love, may he bless you. May you know what that means from the inside out by experience, not just in your head, but in your heart. And follow the example we've been celebrating all the time we've been together. Amen.
Amen.
so much for coming. Bye-bye.